So welcome back, everyone. We've reached the final segment on Vedic ritual, where we're now going to take a look at the structure of a public Shrauta Vedic ritual. Now, if you haven't yet watched the Altar of Fire documentary, you really should do so before this segment, so you can get kind of a visual sense of what's going on. Now, as we talked about last time, there are two kinds of Vedic ritual. There's the public rites, which are called Shrauta, right? And the domestic rites, which are called Gruhya. The Gruhya rites have only one fire. The public rites have three. Now, these three fires are all kind of ritually created out of that sacrificial patron's own domestic fire that he has to keep burning perpetually in his home from the time that he's married. If you don't have one of those, you can't do a Shrauta rite. The first fire this first fire is called the householder fire. At the start of a public ritual, the patron's domestic fire is ritually transferred from inside his home into a circular pit made of bricks, which is placed on the western side of the altar. The other two fires are created for the ritual from that householder fire. By the way, the whole fire altar first has to be ritually set up and prepared by chanting a ton of Rigveda mantras over each brick that's used and over each tool that's going to be used in the rite. Every item that's going to be involved in the Vedic ritual has to be consecrated by Vedic mantras, and it takes quite a long time to do so. Remember also that there were no fixed temples or altars in Vedic religion, so each time you wanted to do one of these Shrauta rituals, you had to create that whole ritual space from scratch. Now, what about the other two fires in our three-fire rite? The offertorial fire is actually the main fire, and it's placed in a square pit made of bricks on the east side of the altar. This is the fire in which all the offerings to the gods are actually going to be poured into. It's where Agni himself is sitting, and he's going to carry those offerings up to heaven through his smoke. It's seen as also the central source of the priestly power, or Brahman, that's going to be activated during the sacrifice. On the south side, there's a third fire pit, and it's semicircular in shape. It's kind of interesting, and it's called the southern fire, and this is designed to ward against any malevolent or evil forces that might attack your ritual. Actually, according to some scholars, this kind of reflects the idea that tribal and non-Aryan lands lay to the south of the old Vedic cultures, but of course this is just speculation. It is the way it is. Apart from these three fires, there's some other important features to the Vedic ritual arena. In the center, you'll see this small hyperbolic shaped pit that's either dug into the ground or it's built up from bricks. This is the Vedi, or the altar, around which the rites and the recitations are all being done. Then there's various wooden, stone, and clay tools. They're all generally placed to inside this Vedi. To the east of the offertorial fire, there's a much larger arena that's constructed in various shapes and sizes based on the rite that's being done. This is called the Mahavedi, or the big altar. The Mahavedi is supposed to be where the gods actually come down and sit and hang out for the party, so it has to be ritually made comfortable for the gods by strewing grass all over it. The other important site within the ritual arena is the yupa, or the sacrificial post, where the animal victim of the ritual is to be tied up and ritually consecrated. It's located on the east side of the Mahavedi. Now, there's some controversy about what goes on at the yupa. Right? In the older depictions of an animal sacrifice, it seems that what happens is that once the animal's tied to the post, and the sacrificial victim has to be slaughtered by a specialist who's called the shamitar, or the pacifier. It's said that this shamitar cuts the throat of the animal. Later, in the classical ritual texts, the form of killing is changed to strangulation. And eventually, the strangulation is not even done at the yupa in the arena. Instead, the animal gets consecrated at the yupa, then taken out of the arena, strangulated, butchered, and then its various body parts are brought back into the arena to be offered to the different deities. Even later, when violence becomes kind of a general problem in Hindu thought, and nonviolence is really, kind of the central ethical theme, Vedic practitioners develop a scheme through which they could get away with not killing the animal at all. Instead, they introduce a ritual of substitution where they take a rice ball wrapped in banana leaves and substitute it for the animal victim that they've consecrated. What all of this kind of shows, this progression shows, is that clearly from a very long time ago, there's a discomfort among the kind of very solemn and otherwise non-violent Brahmin priestly communities about the kind of unquestionable demands for killing that's involved in these Vedic sacrifices. They found better and better ways maybe to take animal slaughter and violence outside of the arena altogether until substitution made it possible to kind of eliminate violence entirely. Okay, so if that's the spatial structure of the public sacrifice, what about the people, the players involved in the actual ritual? Just like everything else in Vedic culture, the roles of the players, the people involved, is also highly scripted, and there are rules for where people would sit in the ritual arena. It's all very highly scripted. The principal player in the Vedic sacrifice is a man called the Yajamana, who's the sacrificial patron. He's the one who sponsors the sacrifice and on whose behalf all the other priests are performing the ritual. The priests aren't doing it for themselves per se, they're doing it for their patron. And it's the patron who gets all of the special benefits that are supposed to come from doing the ritual. Before the ritual, the Yajamana has to undergo a special ceremony called a diksha, or consecration, so that he's made pure and auspicious and suitable for the ritual. During the whole time of the ritual that he's under consecration, he has to remain celibate. He's not allowed to take a bath, and he has to abstain from eating any kinds of food or drink that's not explicitly prescribed in the ritual. Most rituals are maybe like a few hours or a couple of days, but some of the really big ones last for weeks or months or years. So it's not such an easy thing to be a yajamana. Right? The yajamana's domestic fire is the one that's used to create those 3 fires in the arena. And the entire ritual arena is actually interesting. It's tailor-made to the physical measurements of the yajamana. They take the measurements of the yajamana, and then everything from the enclosure to the bricks themselves, all of it is designed as different proportions based on the yajamana's body measurements. So it means that the whole altar is kind of an extension of the yajamana's own body, which kind of reminds you of what? The Purusha myth, right? Now, even though the Yajamana is the one who's sponsoring the public sacrifice, the Shrauta sacrifice, he's not the one who's actually doing the ritual. This is done by a team that involves 4 different kinds of priests. The Hotar, we've already encountered the Hotar, remember? He was the priest of the Rig Veda, and he sits on the north side of the altar, and he chants whatever appropriate mantras you're supposed to chant from the Rig Veda Samhita when it's the time in the ceremony to chant it. He usually had a few assistants also who specialize in certain kinds of mantra chanting. So he's got a team. The Hotar's Rig Veda chanting is always loud and solemn and rhythmical. Everything is poetry that he says, and it's supposed to be heard by the gods, right? The second kind of priest is the Samaveda priest, or the Udgatar, who would sing the Samaveda melodies. He had a more specialized role, a limited role. You only need a Samaveda, a Udgatar, for specific Soma offerings. If there's no Soma, there's no Sama, right? If you're only just offering meat or ghee or something like that, you don't need a Samaveda singer. So as you can imagine, this is the kind of the most rare of the Vedic priests, and there's never been just as high of a demand for the Samaveda priests in comparison to the others. And it's actually the most threatened as far as the Vedic traditions go to extinction. The third kind of priest is called the Advaryu, or the Yajurveda priest. His is the voice that you hear the most often, actually, in the Altar of Fire documentary. He's the workhorse of the bunch. He's the one who always has to run around and do things, who has to mutter all the formulas of the Yajurveda as he does all the activities in the sacrificial arena. He's got a whole team of Yajurveda priests with him as well. The fourth kind of major kind of priest is called the Brahman, and here's now a fourth kind of usage of that word. I'm sure you're super excited to learn that there's yet another Brahman. Right? I'm going to capitalize this fellow with italics, but without the final to differentiate it from the force. The Brahman with a little b, from the text, the Brahmanas with an a at the end and in italics, and then the Brahman, or the social caste of priests, which we'll write without italics, but with a big B. All right, you got all that? Good. Now that you've got that straight, what is this fellow, this Brahman? What he does is that he acts as a superintendent, or kind of like a stage manager for the whole show. If anyone forgets what's going on, forgets a step, he kind of whispers to them what they need to do. If someone makes a mistake, he steps in and kind of substitutes other rituals that can be used to fix the mistake. This makes them really important, actually, because all kinds of things can go wrong in this kind of massive, long public production. So many players, so many team members trying to all work together to get the ritual done. You need somebody who can keep things organized. Because this Brahman needs to have access to magical formulas that are used to fix problems or ward off evil omens, the Brahman has come to be associated with the Atharva Veda, though maybe originally it wasn't the case that he had to be an Atharva Veda priest. The last important player in the public sacrifice is one I want to talk about, but who often gets kind of overlooked in this whole thing, which is the wife of the sacrificer, the Patni. The Patni rarely is asked to say anything in the sacrifice, and when she does, it's usually echoing what the Yajamana has said that she should say. So she basically accompanies this Yajamana during various ceremonies that require her to be a kind of symbol of fertility or sexuality, both on the personal level of the sacrificer himself and on the more abstract cosmic or universal level as kind of the feminine principle of the cosmos. All of this is fine, it's kind of standard in ritual, but as we're going to see, there's one particular ritual which is almost never performed, but was considered to be kind of the grandest spectacle of all Vedic culture, where the Patni has to do a few things that kind of most of us would cringe to do ourselves or ask our wives to do, and this is the horse sacrifice, or Ashwamedha. It's very controversial. When people study it today, it might shock you. And even back then, in the ancient Vedic past, or post-Vedic past, it seemed to have been kind of controversial. We'll be spending our whole unit next time looking at taking a closer look at the Ashwamedha and its development, and how it came to have these kind of odd things that were asked of the sacrificer's wife. Now, in wrapping up this session on Vedic ritual, maybe I can emphasize just how intricate, large-scale, and sophisticated of a production this whole public Vedic ritual had become. And hopefully you've also kind of appreciated it. It was truly a state-level event and would have required a lot of funding and planning and a kind of huge commitment from the entire community to really pull this kind of ritual off. It was very different in a lot of ways from what Hindu rituals are like today in Shiva temples or Vishnu temples, Ganesha, goddess, whatever. But if we happen to visit North India, let's say like 700 BC, we would undoubtedly be able to witness these sacrifices taking place on a daily basis, really, all over villages, cities in northern India, from the smallest daily offerings in the domestic Agnihotra in any household, to the large-scale theatrical ceremonies that would take place in these public arenas, sponsored by wealthy and powerful kings and other donors. In the next session, we'll look at the grandest Vedic rite of all, the horse sacrifice, and what it might have meant to the Vedic people, maybe how it got a bit too grand, which would eventually prompt a kind of entire rethinking of what we're all doing anyway in Vedic ritual culture in the formation of the Upanishads. So, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.